It's 2024, 30 years after the first democratic elections of South Africa. We have 14 million unregistered young South Africans. Now, when you compare that to the youth of 76 who fought for education, who took to the streets to voice their complaints, we are facing a huge problem where the current youth are not coming to the party. Where could this have gone wrong?
The young people of this country have been deliberately depoliticized. This is why many of them think these things we do of politics is too serious and it's too boring.
We as young people, it's in our future country. So if we don't believe in voting, who's gonna believe in it? Because
I need to be in my senses to know what is it that I'm doing when I register to vote.
These new parties that are springing up every week in South Africa, they want to share the cake that the ANC is already eating.
They say politics is about power and it's not about the truth. It's Hlengiwe Mfeka on your screen. Stay tuned to find more about politics. This is South African Conversation by DUT Journalism, and I'm not alone. I'm with Enzokuhle Sabela.
This is South African Conversation by DUT Journalism, where we'll be unpacking politics and political conversations by journalism students. 2024 marks an important year in our democracy. It's the 30th anniversary of the first time where we had democratic elections in South Africa.
Joining us today to tackle this issue of politics and youth and the voting, we have Thobani Zikalala, who is a political commentator, and we also have Malusi Msomi, who is the Independent Electoral Commission. Welcome, gentlemen.
So straight into the questions.
My question will be directed to Thobani. DUT students that we spoke to largely say they are voting because they're not happy with the things that are going on in the country. Do you think this is the general sentiment for young people and the reason for voting in South Africa?
It could be many things, my brother. I don't think this would be the general consensus that people vote because they are angry. But of course, with South African politics, if you understand them properly, you will understand that the South African voter is an emotive voter. The South African voter is, for lack of a better word, and with all due respect, is not a rational voter, right? It's not a voter who votes because he has read hundreds and hundreds of pages of manifestos and has been critical of government policies. There's a person who votes according to what government has made them feel and has made them go through. So it will be one of the sentiments that will lead people to go to vote, but it's not generally the only one, because other people go to vote because they are happy. They are happy with the status quo, they want it to remain, they want it to improve, but other people go to vote because they are unhappy with the status quo and they don't want it to happen. But for me, South Africa should have, and South African youth in particular, should have a much more nuanced way of why we engage in politics. And I think we engage in politics the same way we engage in football. We have a thinking that politics is like supporting Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs, and it's not. This is about our lives. This is about giving people power and authority to decide on our lives, and it can't be about how we feel on a certain day. It must really be a logical thing that we engage in. And unfortunately, young people who have got the vibrancy, the energy, the intellectual capacity, because many of them are going through schooling and tertiary education, seems to be most of the people who don't want to participate in this process. And it's a process that is much more impactful on their lives, because they are the people who've got maybe in terms of life propensity and expectancy who will still be able to live in this country for the next 30 years. And those are the people who should be participating today so that they can decide what type of future they are going to live in. But unfortunately, it seems that they are not the ones who are then more, people who are a bit older, the ones who are deciding what the future looks like.
So for the youth, I am a youth and I do not know anything about politics. At home we don't talk about politics. What is your take, and what do you think the youth, or what direction do you think the youth should be taking in terms of the movement you are talking about when it comes to politics and voting?
I mean, in simple terms, as a political science student, I would say to you,
politics is an issue of power and authority. So that's the most basic thing. So when you speak political parties, you are speaking one of the political actors. You're not speaking politics as a body or as a discipline. Politics is an issue of power and authority. So when we speak political sciences, then we say it's a science of power and authority. It's a matter of saying who gets to get the power, who has the authority to decide and make decisions over us, who has the legitimacy of authority. And that, for me, young people is something they should be concerning themselves about. And this is not just saying we must discuss it at home. Of course, I believe households should be able to discuss the nature of politics and the political situation in the country. I mean, parents, I think also they need to take a deliberate and responsibility to making sure that their young people are able to be politically conscientized as early as possible. And political consciousness is not just conscientizing people again of political parties. It's just conscientizing people of how politics works, who are the participants, how do we as society play a role. Because I think over the past 30 years, and I may be criticized for this, but I think in the past 30 years, the young people of this country have been deliberately depoliticized. That we almost don't think of anything in political terms. Whereas just 30 years ago, everything in this country was political. Which school we went to, which mall we went to, which sport we got to play, all of these were decided by people who had the political power. Post 1994, 30 years after democracy, suddenly there are things that we believe are not a consequence of political decision and political processes. And I think that has been deliberate. The young people of this country have been deliberately depoliticized. This is why many of them think these things we do of politics is too serious and it's too boring. And they are more focused on the things that are vibey, that are nice. And it's not that politics is boring. But maybe it's because majority of the people who participate in this thing are 30 years, 40 years older than you. So what is interesting to them may not be interesting to you, which means you must participate more to make this space more conducive to you as a young person. I mean, there's a lot we could do as young people in this country. I mean, I have a few years in this so-called constitutional space called youth. But I believe there's a lot that we can do. But a part of what we need to do is reading and reading and reading. We can't be a young people who are so vacuous, who are so empty politically, who don't understand political processes, who don't read, who don't watch the news, who just seem to living on trends.
I want to bring in you, Malusi, on the conversation because I see someone is getting heated up, and I hope the youth is watching and listening. And for you, Malusi, there's an act. It's according to Section 5 of the IEC. It says that the Electoral Commission of South Africa's duty is to promote voter education. And my question to you is, what kind of voter education is initiated? What kind of voter education exists in our days? Because I'm sure that the youth is eager to know.
No, thank you, and I'm glad you asked it in such a way that you said nowadays. Because as society grows, things change with new technology. If you look at where we come from, way before when I was growing up, I think I was not even in the voting age. I think I was missing the first voting by about months or so. We had Khululega Be Free, and then
the comedy show.
It was very educative. But if you look at it now, would it make the same difference as it did then if we were to bring it back now?
Now we have a Mapiano.
Now we have a Mapiano. And the youth of today, not like I did back then, because back then the only thing that I knew was the television. So it made sense to watch Khululega. But the youth of today is now on the phones, on their phones. So as the Electoral Commission, by and large, we've tried to catch up with where the youth is. And I'm happy that Uskakane is raising these issues of the youth not participating. Because nowadays we find the youth on YouTube, on X, basically on social media. And that's where we also, as the Electoral Commission, are trying to get to the youth.
To catch up.
But over and above that, we've also tried and sort of locate where the youth is. That is why we've got programs like the SDW,
Yes.
the Schools Democracy Week, the Schools Democracy Program, where we go to schools, especially to the grades that are sort of close to the voting age, but also just this week we will be launching the tertiary institutions campaign, where we go to tertiary institutions, encourage the youth to vote. That's what we did last time. Excuse me. But also now, because we are gearing up to the 29th of May, that's when we are encouraging the youth. Now that you are registered, participate. Because it's another thing to say I'm registered, but are you going to participate?
So hearing the comments from an IEC official, we'd like to hear what students have to say, people who have been of voting age for a number of years, people who have been registered for a number of years.
We as young people, like, it's in our future country. So if we don't believe in voting, like, who's gonna believe in it? Because they do vote, but they don't have a future. They're just finishing up in Nyagabesel. It's in started that initiative and we can do that by selecting an organization as well as leader for his
isasizami zokuthi ngithi ngimncane kangaka ngirejistele ukuvota ingoba ngikhathalelwe i-ANC ekugcineni ngifuna ukuthi i-ANC iphume comrade because i-ANC iyabahlukumeza abantu kuyimanje sine-load shedding asikwazi ukufunda singabafundi basenyuvesi uqala ukuthini ugesi uhamba ngo-8 ugesi uhamba kanjani ngo-8 kubhalwa ama-students asevasithi ebhala kumele ngabe ayafunda thola ukuthi ugesi uyobuya ngo-10 usuke usukhathele umqondo usungathathathi lutho.
The reason ngibone kubalulekile ukuvota is because as young people especially we are facing high employment rate. Our graduates are not being employed. Also kuma higher institutions lately sinenkinga ka NSFAS due to which they are now having companies as distributing allowances on their behalf. So I feel like as in Jayala in South Africa uma ngabe sivota we are giving ourselves a voice ukuthi sifuna phatheka kanjani in terms of job opportunities and in terms of uma high institutions nathi sibe ne voice ukuthi sithanda ukuthi izinto zenzeke kanjani.
So hearing what the IEC has to say about voter education, I'd like to direct my next question to Malusi. So we've got, the IEC has different campaigns. Now, I think it was the day before election registration closed, where we had a popular YouTube influencer who tricked her followers into registering to vote. Now, the IEC is notorious for handing out pamphlets on the street corner and having a little 15-second video on social media educating young South Africans. Now, we've seen that it's not as effective as maybe you would aim it to be. Would you not think it would be more effective if you partnered with the Department of Education and made life orientation examinable from grade 10 level all the way to matric? Because if it is examinable, then we are including them in a democracy, in democratic expression and democratic education from the age of 16, 2 years before they are eligible to vote or registered to vote. Is it not more effective in that manner and approaching young people on their level, not just a random 15-second video? So use the influences that they are so passionate about.
No, certainly. But first of all, for me, I wouldn't want anyone to trick me into being a registered voter. Yes. Because I think that's the first important thing that we'll need to understand, that I need to be in my senses to know what is it that I'm doing when I register to vote. So that come participation time, that is why you hear the Skakani giving you the numbers of people that are registered versus the number who actually go out and participate and vote, yes. So we need to make sure that everyone that does register to vote actually understands the importance of registering and eventually going out to participate by voting. Now, the question you are asking is the things that we are doing as the Electoral Commission, by the way. Next week, in the whole of KZN, as different districts, we'll be sitting with LO educators from the Department of Education, where we'll be looking at their annual teaching plans, exactly from grade 10, 11, and 12, so that we can be able to align their content together with the Electoral Commission's content to say what is it that the Department of Education is teaching these young kids about democracy, so that we can bring that perspective of practicality to their content, and where possible. And we will be going to schools as well to partner with the teachers, LO teachers, so that should there be any questions, we can be able to bring and give practical examples to say, your theory says it like this, but in practical terms, this is how it works. And because we've realized also as the Electoral Commission that whilst voter education is good, because you'll find that voter education is more about the 29th of May, it's now. But the civic education for the citizens is even more important, because it will start you from the structures of government, how the government is structured, so that once you understand those, you'll then be able to, at the end, understand your participation, the value of your participation. Once you understand where we come from, why is the government structured like this, and what is my contribution towards this structure.
Now let's hear thoughts by political commentator and author Mfeka on the 2024 general elections.
These new parties that are springing up every week in South Africa, they want to share the cake that the ANC is already eating. They want a slice from that cake. South Africa, we have a government revenue of 1.6 trillion rands. Many of these parties want a slice of that 1.6 trillion rands. If you ask them, have they thought about how are they going to solve like our human capital problem? They don't even know it exists. they are focusing on the cake. So, and I try and, because I'm a political analyst, I have to try and read their manifestos and talk to their leaders. That's all that they're after, is that cake. They're not interested in solving the deep problems of our society, let alone in moving South Africa several notches up. Because you cannot move our country several notches up without sacrifice. So you can't be driving these huge 4x4s and at the same time save and build a factory. It's one or the other. And they are not prepared to sacrifice their massive 4x4s and their palaces in order to build a factory.
How many voters are new voters, and of those new voters, how many are you?
By new voters, I'm not sure what we mean by new voters, but what I can tell you is that currently our voters roll is standing at 27 million registered voters. Out of those, I will categorize new voters as the young voters, people that will be like your first time voters. Voting. Now, because I did those numbers that you are asking, and between the ages of 18 and 19, statistics says we've got about 5 million people, young South African citizens, between the ages of 18 and 19. But if you go to our voters roll, that's where you see that we only have 559,000 registered voters. So basically, we've got 4.5 million South African citizens between the ages of 18 and 19 missing in the voters roll. It means they won't be participating as we are going to the 29th of May because they are not registered. But also, if you look between the ages of 20 to 29, State SA says we've got 9.8 million South African citizens between the ages of 20 to 29. And in our voters roll, we've got 4.4 million. So it means the missing people there that are not registered. I'm not even talking about the people that will not be participating that are registered. I'm talking people that are missing that are not registered. We are talking about 5.4 million South African citizens that are not registered. So between the ages of 18 and 29, we are basically talking about 10 million South Africans that are not registered at all. So they are missing. They won't be participating because they are not registered. So if you ask me how many are registered, out of the 15 million or so South African citizens that are between the ages of 18 and 29, we only have about 4.5 million that are registered.
So thank you for tuning in today. We've had an amazing conversation. Thank you to Hlengiwe, my co-host. Thank you to Malusi from the IEC, and Thobani, a political commentator. Two things before we close. South Africans, young South Africans, make the right choice come 29 May, and don't just blame the IEC. Meet them halfway and allow yourself to be educated in the best way to grow our democracy to the next phase, because we are the youth, we are the future leaders of this country. Thank you for joining us.